So, welcome, as I said, to Changing Your Value Story. We're going to support you tonight in looking at how to create greater resources, accelerate your success, find and fulfill your purpose, which seems to be like the theme this week. But I think it's the theme this week because the celestial weather is kind of highlighting that a little bit. So, there's a lot for us to cover tonight. So, we're going to hit a lot of different angles and have a lot of different conversations about value and where value lives in the chart. The piece that I really want to start with that's important for you to understand is that when we talk about the chart, we're really talking about the chart in general as a blueprint for the human potential. And I want you to know that your chart, the way your chart is configured, really clearly outlines your soul curriculum, what you're here to learn, and how you interface with the world. And we all have all of the charts. So as we talk about whatever elements we talk about tonight, please don't go look at your chart and say, I don't have that. What's wrong with me? Am I going to? We all have all of it. Whatever's colored in is part of your soul curriculum. It's part of what you're here to learn about. And it's part of your internal learning process. Whatever is white in your chart or open in your chart, that's what you're here to learn from your relationships with others. So we all have all of the chart, just like we all have the human genome in our DNA. But we express it differently. And we express it differently because we have different drivers in our soul curriculum. So one of the things that I believe that is really important for us to be understanding right now at this time on the planet is that we're in the middle of a big evolutionary shift. And that big evolutionary shift actually started in 1781, which kind of sets us up for where we're headed next. Part of what happened in 1781 is that the human design chart, or our chart, our energy system, it's not the chart, but our energy system actually changed. We went from being seven-centered beings, meaning we went from the seven chakras of the traditional Hindu chakra system to becoming nine-centered beings. The heart center split into the identity center, or the G center, and the will center. The solar plexus chakra split into the spleen and the emotional solar plexus. This was the first phase, or the first step in a big evolution. The chart itself is still changing, or the energy field of who we are is still changing. We're actually slated for another shift in how our energy field operates, and it's supposed to take place around 2027. But here's the thing. Shifts in consciousness and shifts in the energy field actually happen after the shifts in consciousness take place. So this change in how we experience the world actually started around the beginning of the scientific revolution. The role of the scientific revolution, or our internal conscious drive with the scientific revolution, was an attempt to interpret the material world. And as we tried to get rid of fear, manage our superstitions, and regain our own control, not even regain, but gain control, sovereignty over our own lives, and started to really question things like, is the king really the one in power? Or should we follow everything the church says? Or am I really stuck in this level of my life? Or can I create something better for my life? These were big questions we began exploring in consciousness. And when we started to land on the answers to these questions, the energy field, our energy field shifted in response. So tonight our focus is going to be very much on the will center, which emerged at the end of the scientific revolution. That will center is part of our personal identity. It's the place where our ego lives. And part of what happens with this ego is it translates the material world. It translates the material experience. It is the place where we measure value. And we measure value on the material level. So oftentimes we're translating that value into things that measure value, like money and numbers. So, all right, in quantum human design, we call the will center the resource center. As I said, it's the center that's associated with material value, money, resources. It is actually where self-worth lives in the chart. It's where willpower lives in the chart. It is a part of the chart that has at its heart the theme of sustainability. When we work with this center correctly, and in particular, when we have a value story that really reflects our value, then we create in the world in a sustainable way. We avoid the boom and bust cycles with burnout. We have enough to give the world. We actually have enough. So I have to just sort of call out Evelyn Levinson for a minute, because she shared with me one time in her conversation that we were having about energy, that when we talk about giving from a cup, we're still giving. We're still going to be in boom and bust cycles with our energy. If you give from a full cup, whatever you give leaves you with a half empty cup or an empty cup, depending on how much you give, right? If you're giving from an overflowing cup and you're actually sharing with the world from your saucer, then you're actually sustainable. And so the goal of the will center is to fill up your metaphorical cup, if you will, to such a degree to where it overflows into your saucer and you always have extra to share. Physiologically, the will center is associated with the heart, the stomach, the gallbladder, and the thymus. And of course, as I said, part of what the will center teaches us, especially when it's open, which most of us have this open, is it teaches us how to know what's truly valuable in life. So if you have an open will center, there's a tendency to be driven by a need to prove your value or to prove yourself, to question your value. Sometimes we burn out because we engage in a lot of activities that are all about proving our worth and our value, right? If we don't use this energy center correctly, we oftentimes will struggle with resting and resting well, which we're going to talk about later. The open will center oftentimes doesn't manage resources well because it doesn't have a good sense of the material value and what material value works. And it's part of where, as I said, the theme for money lives. All of this, by the way, is changing. We're in this huge evolutionary shift. And as it changes, we're beginning to reframe the metrics of value, and we're learning to tap into a state of well-being and integrity in a very different way than we have before. So when we look at this center, one of the gates on the center, which I think right now is probably the most important gate for us, all of us, it's like this is the gate, or the theme of this gate is what's up for all of us. And the theme of this gate is integrity. Integrity is one of the gates that regulates our sense of value and how we behave in the world based on our sense of value. Integrity, the gate 26, again, remember, it doesn't matter if you have it defined or open on your chart. We all have it, so we're all going to play with these archetypes and these themes. The gate 26 is actually one of the places where we hold on to trauma. It is a place where we are either in integrity with who we are, or we're out of integrity with who we are. When we live in integrity with who we are living from a place of high self-worth, and we take actions that claim and proclaim and defend our value in the world so that we stay sustainable. Anytime we experience trauma, meaning anytime we are repeatedly given the message and we internalize the message that it's not okay for us to be who we are or how we are, literally the body and the energy field experiences that as a micro trauma. It's a threat to who we are. It's a threat to our existence. And when we internalize that message and it causes us to have an injury in our integrity, an injury in our structural integrity, it literally starts to damage who we are. It impacts the body, it impacts the immune system, and it certainly impacts the way in which we behave in the world. So there are 5 kinds of integrity associated with the gate 26. There's physical integrity, which is being physically whole, healthy, and vital. Resource integrity, which means having the tangible resources and goods that you need to stay sustainable and to have enough to share. There's identity integrity, which is being in alignment with your authentic self. There's moral integrity, which means acting in alignment with higher principles. By the way, this shows up when we think we're not enough. Because when we think we're not enough, then we don't perceive the world as being enough, and we don't think we're worthy of being supported. So sometimes we do sneaky things or immoral things to try to get what we perceive of as our fair share. The 5th kind of integrity is energetic integrity. That means taking the actions necessary to sustain your energy, setting good boundaries, and implementing good self-care. Anytime we have an injury to any of these 5 areas, or anytime we're struggling with self-worth, it's going to cause us to either experience a further injury in our self-worth, or it'll cause us to have a low level of integrity in these 5 areas. So one of the things we're going to share with you later on in this presentation is how our self-worth impacts us in ways that sometimes we don't expect. So we use a system of alignment called the quantum alignment system. And one of the things that we've learned over the years is that there's a really powerful relationship between your relationship with money and your self-worth and trauma. And what we have found over the years is that when we work with people who are really struggling with money, oftentimes that money struggle is a big symptom that there's something else. There's a breach of integrity somewhere that causes someone to create in the world from a place of not enough, feeling like they are not enough. And that oftentimes shows up in not having enough money or not being able to create enough money, which is a resource, resource integrity. So the American Psychological Association reports that about 60% of the population reports themselves as feeling traumatized. One of the things that I've been doing over the last few years is research on trauma and perception of trauma. And in my research, I find that that number is more like 80%. So trauma, according to traditional definition, is any perceived threat to your survival, anything that overwhelms capacity and produces a sense of powerlessness, anything that produces feelings of isolation and aloneness, anything that violates your expectations. In the work that I've done with people over the years, I've really redefined trauma. And I like to define it now as kind of macro trauma and micro trauma. And the reason why I split it out is because I really want to be very clear that there are some just horrifying, horrible, very traumatic experiences that happen to people that can really kick them into, trauma reactivity and PTSD. And those events are very different than what I'll call micro trauma, which is the experience of repeatedly receiving and integrating messages that say, you're not lovable, you're not valuable. And those messages get internalized and people begin to really question who they are and how they are, and they lose connection with their right place in the world, that role that they are designed to play. While that kind of trauma is what I'll call a micro trauma, we have micro traumas, repeated micro traumas over and over again. When your second grade teacher says this, when your mom says this, if you're bullied in school, literally the body integrates that experience the same way that it does macro trauma. So even though it's not the same as, say, fleeing a war or, having some kind of really horrifying experience happen to you, the body actually reacts in the same way. It is literally a threat to your existence. Maybe not your physical existence, but it's a threat to your identity, your integrity. Okay, take a deep breath here for a minute. I've given you already a lot of information. I know that I've fire hosed you, so we'll take a breath. We're going to shift gears just a little bit, and we're going to talk about, when we talk about changing your value story, why your story matters so much, and why, if the story you're telling is a story that isn't in integrity with the true value of who you are, how that might really be impacting your life. And we're going to explore over the next few slides not only why your story matters, but what you can start to do to start shifting your story so that you create a different point of attraction and creation in your life. So I'm going to unpack for you relatively quickly, but just I want to do this because this is really important. I want to unpack for you the components that go into you manifesting or creating the life that you're in right now. So everything in your life right now is the sum total of every decision, every choice you've ever made. It is the sum total of every response that you've had to every stimulus in your life. Part of why I'm going to give you all the parts in the creative equation, all the things that happen for you to create the life that you're in right now, is because when you start to understand this process of how you create your life, you start to regain control over it, so that when you experience a stimulus, instead of reacting, being responsive and reacting, you start to get control over that space between stimulus and response. And now all of a sudden you can become much more deliberate, much more conscious in how you choose to respond to the stimulus that life brings you. So the first component in the creative equation is called the quantum field. Sometimes you might think of this as the unmanifest reality. So basically, right now, at this very moment, you are swimming in a field of infinite non-manifest or unmanifested potentials. So there are innumerable, infinite number of options for your life. You're sitting in a pool of them, but they're not manifest yet. They're just existing as pure potential at this moment. You have what we'll call a mental and emotional body. This is a part of your energy field where you hold your conditioning. So there's a part of you who you perceive yourself to be that has an energy filter, if you will. And that energy filter that's holding together this story of who you think you are contains all the memories that you have of everything that you've experienced. It contains all of your experience of your human design chart, especially your openness. It contains the mindsets that you learned from your family, the things your teacher said, all the things that happened to you. It contains the emotional artifacts of everything that happened to you, the emotional memories, and it even carries your ancestral lineage and the memories of your ancestral lineage. So you have this part of your aura, the mental and emotional body, that holds together the story that you think of who you think you are and your experiences. In addition to the mental and emotional bodies, there's another body of energy called the subtle body. This is sometimes referred to as your aura or your energy field. If you've ever gone to get acupuncture or energy healing or Reiki or quantum healing, or anybody's worked with any kind of energy technique with you or energy healing, oftentimes what's happening is they are working on your subtle body, which is basically a template. So that subtle body is a template. It's basically the energy grid that's holding together your current life right now. And it contains information about things that you're about to manifest or things that you're in the process of unmanifesting. So for example, if you go see a good medical empath or a good medical intuitive, they might be able to sit with you and look at your aura, scan your aura and say, oh, it looks like you're getting over a cold. You must have been sick last week. And you're like, yep, how'd she know that? Big thing. She knows that because it's in the energy template or in the subtle body. A really good psychic is also going to be able to tell you things like, wow, looks like your soulmate's about to show up, because you'll be carrying the energy of your soulmate in the energy template right before you manifest it. The last component in the creative process is your manifest reality. That's your life right now. So your life right now is part of the creative process. So if we were going to do this in a much more simple way, the way we would do this is we'd say, you're swimming in a quantum field of infinite possibilities. You got your life right now, and there's a filter in between those two realms, right? You've got infinite possibilities and kind of finite possibilities right now in your life. The filter, that filter is your story. That story that is the story of who you are, who you perceive yourself to be. Your story is influencing which one of these infinite possibilities you are actually manifesting in your life right now. It's meaning or stories, the meaning we give the stories of our life, or the meaning we give the concepts of our life. It's the meanings of what that we hold that determine what we manifest. So the meanings we have about things are determined by our conditioning field. So if you have, let's say, a meaning about money, money by itself is kind of a neutral idea, right? If you have a meaning about money, the meanings you have about money and the conditioning you have about money are going to influence how you experience money in your physical world. If you want to create a different experience of well-being, or a different experience of self-worth, or a different experience of value in your life, the first thing we usually have to start tackling is the meanings we have. Those meanings have to be aligned if you want to have good, high-quality meanings in your story so that your filter is going to pick really great options. Those meanings that you have in your story need to be aligned with a high sense of value and self-worth. Now, I want to throw one other piece in here that's important for us to understand. So far, just let's unpack for half a second. Here's what we've talked about. We've talked about the will center. We've talked about the fact the will center is in great flux right now. We've talked about the fact that this is a place where we hold our self-worth and where we start to construct a story around our value in the world. We've talked about how if we don't have a good story, or if we've experienced any kind of experience in our life that's caused us to lose connection with who we are and question our value, it causes us to tell a story that's oftentimes out of integrity with who we really are. We've looked at the creative process. We've looked at the importance of having a good, healthy story so that the options that you create in your life are going to be a reflection of self-worth. Now we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about the importance of rest. And part of why we're going to talk about the importance of rest is because that will center energy has built into it a need for rest. And this is true whether you have an open will, whether it's white in your chart or red in your chart. Now, I will tell you, if it's red in your chart, you don't have any wiggle room on this conversation. You have to have consistent rest. You have to have cycles of rest. But really, we all do. We all do. And part of what happens is when we have an open will, we push and push and push and push because we're oftentimes trying to prove our value. And in our culture right now, the way our culture is structured, the way our value system is structured, and don't worry, we're outgrowing this, but we're still kind of knee deep in it, is we have this really interesting metric around your value and how much you do. And the more you do, the more value you have. And so what happens is, especially over the last 100 years since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, well, it's probably more than 100 years now, what's happened is we've started to measure people's value by how much they work. And we've skipped the rest piece. And part of what happens when we skip rest is, number one, first of all, we lose our creative edge. People who are tired are not creative. And at a time on the planet where we need to be more creative than ever, we need people to be creative. Number two, if you're not resting well, you're going to burn yourself out. Eventually, you're going to get so out of integrity that your body's going to fail. You'll get out of physical integrity. And actually, burnout costs the world billions, literally billions of dollars a year. In fact, burnout is now a medical diagnosis according to the World Health Organization. Burnout is an incredibly powerful problem. And part of what we're seeing, I think, right now, especially post the last couple of years, post-COVID, part of what we're seeing in this emerging consciousness is that people are going, wait, hold up. I liked being at home with my family. I liked not having to be in the hustle and the grind. I liked that experience. And what I'm starting to see is that I don't want to go back to how it was before. I don't want that hustle culture anymore. It doesn't work. It's not sustainable. And here's the thing. You can't create something you don't embody first. We're in a place where the world needs sustainability. And we can't create sustainability if we ourselves are not first sustainable. So we have to look at rest. And we have to look at the importance of the relationship between our value story and our rest story, because oftentimes when we devalue ourselves, we think we can increase our value in the world by doing more and more and more instead of resting. Truth is, the more you rest, the better you rest. First of all, the more connected you will be to source, the more creative you will be. And as I said, the more sustainable you will be. You'll also be a heck of a lot more productive, by the way. All right, rest is connected to our sense of worth and our value. Rest is important because I said it creates sustainability, it creates more and not less, and it increases creativity. There's 4 kinds of rest, and I really want to unpack these for you for just a minute, because if we don't rest correctly, and if you skip some of these important foundational ways of resting, you'll actually not be well rested, even though you might be thinking that you're resting. So the first kind of rest, which is it's so essential. If you don't get this kind of rest, if you don't get enough of this kind of rest, you will not have the resources you need to be able to be sustainable. You will enter into relationships and you'll project onto other people that you need to be rescued. You will be angry and bitter because you'll be too tired to do the things you want to do and you won't have anything to bring to the table. If you don't do this recovery piece first, any other kinds of rest that you do won't be restful. Recovery means doing nothing. It means sleeping, healing the body, lying on the couch, staring off into space. It might mean mindlessly watching Instagram reels. It might mean just sitting and not even thinking, or maybe thinking a little bit. You have to recover. But in a society or in a culture that says rest is doing, there's a, what, you know, when I say, what are you going to rest? Well, what should I do to rest? You don't do rest. You don't do rest. Okay. You don't do while you're resting. It's not doing. I hope that made sense. Anyway, you absolutely have to have sleep is one form of recovery. And you just need flat out downtime that's not doing anything, where you're literally just sitting and making sure that you're recovered. Oftentimes, the signal that you're done recovering is that you get bored. If you start to feel bored, it's like, okay, that's enough. You've done enough recovering. Reclaiming is the second kind of rest. This kind of rest is anything that you do to bring yourself back into a state of integrity. Okay, so this is getting coaching, going to therapy. This is self-care like massage, facials. This is taking a personal growth and development workshop. This is sitting in a hot springs. This is anything that you do that brings yourself back into integrity with who you are and back into integrity with your energy and your energy field. Recreation is the third kind of rest. Now, this is the kind of rest we tend to jump into first. So when the weekend hits, we start recreating or playing, and we skip the recovery, and we skip the reclaiming, and then we end the weekend more tired than we started, or we go on vacation and we come home from our vacation and we need a vacation from our vacation, or we go on vacation and we spend, the first 3 or 4 days of our vacation sleeping, recovering, right? So if you're not doing the recovery piece first, especially, and you won't jump right into play when you do your rest instead of the recovery piece first, you're going to enter into recreational rest, but it's not going to be restful, and actually runs the risk of burning you out. The last kind of rest is called celebration. And this is such an essential part of rest that we, I think, oftentimes neglect to include. So this is the kind of rest where we reconnect to source. We experience gratitude for our life. We celebrate milestones in our life. So obviously, some of the bigger milestones might be getting married or having a baby or having a birthday. These are big things that we celebrate, but we forget sometimes along the way to do ritual and to acknowledge and to celebrate what we've accomplished on a daily basis. When we set our value up and define it around what we do and accomplish, instead of celebrating the journey, the passage of time, the amount of effort, the amount of joy, the amount of alignment, when we don't regularly celebrate life itself, by doing something as beautiful as just sitting around a fire and expressing your gratitude, it doesn't have to be something elaborate, then we run the risk of dropping into experiencing milestones, creating things, and immediately going, okay, what's next? And not acknowledging the joy and the beauty of the moment that we're in right now. Okay, deep breath. Healing the will. So the last thing that I think I want to talk about tonight is I want to explore with you a couple of pathways that are important to helping you heal your self-worth and helping you create a different sense of value in your life. So there's a code in these gates. Not only are the codes for resting in these gates, there's also a code for healing the will in these gates. So the first code comes from the gate 21. The gate 21 is the gate of self-regulation, or gives us the theme of self-management. One of the ways in which you can begin to heal your self-worth is to learn to be self-generous. That means you have to consciously construct a self-generous inner and outer environment, meaning you have to start taking the actions necessary to make sure that your environment is self-generous. That might mean doing something as simple as buying flowers for yourself, or making sure you create an environment for yourself that's beautiful, that sustains your soul and makes you feel really nurtured and loved. It also means you have to have an internal environment that's self-generous. And oftentimes that means you have to regulate how you talk to yourself and how you nurture yourself internally as well. Your story, your self-talk and your story are an important part of regulating your internal and external environment so that you're self-generous in every way. The gate 40 connects us to higher will, meaning when we really live out the theme of the gate 40 and we recognize that we are an integral part of something bigger than who we are. And that this 40 energy, by the way, is part of community energy. It connects to the 37, that channel there, that whole channel there is a channel that brings very important community energy to the world. You can't serve your community if you don't take care of yourself first. And you can't serve your community if you're not making healthy agreements or making agreements that are sustainable. So this 40 says, okay, I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to nurture myself. I'm going to recover, because remember, recovery is here too. And then I'm going to value myself enough to make sure that every agreement that I enter into, every relationship that I enter into, is a reflection of my value. And if the relationship doesn't reflect my value back to me, I will not sustain the will necessary to sustain the relationship. I will walk away. I will say, no, I'm not going to be a part of this. So you have to, as part of healing the will, make sure that you're not making unsustainable agreements with people who don't see your value. And that sometimes means just slowing down a little bit and really making sure the people you're creating relationships with are walking their talk. Authenticity is the next gate in the will center. And certainly anything we do to strengthen integrity, anything we do to reclaim who we are, is essential for healing the self-worth. So again, this is where you want to make sure you're doing, getting the support to do the inner growth, the healing, the aligning, the making sure that the story you tell about who you are is the true story of who you are and not a smaller story or a frightened story or a story that is rationalizing or settling for less than what you deserve. And last but not least, this gate 51 initiation brings us the theme of humility. And I want to talk about humility for half a second, because we think of humility as being self-effacing. I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy. You are worthy. And when we deny our value, we are being in our ego. Who are you to not be in your value? Who are you to deny your value when you were born to assume a unique and vital place in the cosmic plan? The heart of what we can do to heal the will is to build a relationship with Source, to engage in practices that help us remember that we are once in a lifetime cosmic events. We are integral parts of a cosmic whole. And those parts that we play, each and every one of us, are essential to the integral high functioning of the whole. You're here for a reason. You're here because you have a purpose to serve. And when we lose connection with that purpose, we lose our value. We lose our memory of the true story of who we are. And so this 51 energy says, connect with Source, get on your knees, become humble, let yourself connect with Source so that Source can help you remember your true value. So, some questions to contemplate when we think about the will. I want you to take a moment and think about your life and everything that you're doing right now and everything that you feel driven to do right now and everything that you feel like you have to accomplish in your life. Are you driven to do this because you want to do it, because it brings you joy, because it connects you to play and restoration and your true identity and your right place in the cosmic plan? Or are you doing it because you're trying to prove yourself and your value? I think that's an important question to explore, and certainly not one I would expect you to answer tonight in 1/2 a second. But I really would love for you to take that question home and contemplate it. This is the theme of the will center. This is what needs to happen oftentimes for us to heal the will and to decondition the will. We have to look at what's driving us and get honest about doing the things that we do because we think we should. Because if we do those things, it'll fulfill the societal expectations of our value. And usually that means it'll translate in some way to something that has numbers associated with it. the number of years of education that you have, the size of your pants, the number of zeros in your bank account, the number of whatever. Anything we measure in numbers usually is some metric that we've tried to use to prove our value. Go of the numbers and define yourself as precious, inherently precious and valuable simply because you exist. When we look at the will center and we give it its quantum name, the quantum purpose of the will center, otherwise known as the recenter in quantum human design, is to align us with sustainability, community, truth, and value. Thank you all for joining us tonight. This is a big conversation, and my intention for you and my prayer for you is that when you log off your computer tonight, that you lay down in bed and you start contemplating, what's in my value story and what do I want to remove so that my value story is a true story. It's the true story of the preciousness of who I am. What do I need to do in my life to fully embody every aspect of the once in a lifetime energy essence that is me, that only I can bring to the world? So I hope that you got some good takeaways. I hope that you have some things to contemplate. Thank you all for joining us. We'll see you soon. Bye.